I'm Captain Julio Acuna from Colombia. I have my peers here, Captain Miguel Vasquez and Lieutenant Carlos Diaz, also from Colombia. As Captain Jimenez said today, this is going to be like informational briefing. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask. We're going to see our agenda for today. So basically, our first topic is going to be introduction. We're going to give a general orientation of our country. We're going to talk about friendly forces structure and capabilities. We're going to talk about our threat, our insurgency threat, and about some current tactics that our Army employs to fight against these threats. Before we get started, I just want to let you know and make this clear for everyone that in this moment, our country is going through a peace process in Cuba, in Havana. And that topic, it's out of this brief. I guess you all understand that's more politics than military. So we're not going to be involved in that topic. Slide. So a general orientation of our country, Colombia is located in South America. As you can see, the red spot in the map. Next slide. We limit our borders, 5 countries. So to our east, northeast, we have Venezuela. To our southeast, we have Brazil. To the south, our border is with Peru. Southwest, we have Ecuador. And to our northwest, we have Panama. Directly to the north, we have the Caribbean Sea. And to the west, we have the Pacific Ocean. This is how our country is organized. Not like the United States, that you have different states. In our country, we have departments, a total of 32 departments that are the different colors that you could see in this slide. Next. Okay, so our armed forces, this is a general picture of how our forces are organized. So we have task force, and we have our Navy, our Army, and our Air Force. We also have the National Police, but they don't make part of the armed forces. These are the military forces, and we also have the National Police that make part of the armed forces. And in each of our forces, so we have our Marine Corps, makes part of the Navy, and basically in our Army, we have the ground troops, and we also have Aviation Army. And the Air Force, well, it's basically everything about airspace and air superiority, like guarding all our borders. Next slide. Talking about the Army, this is how the Army is organized. So we have our Chief of Staff at the top. He has his Excel. In the bottom, we see the different departments we have. So we have G1. It's all about personnel. In this personnel, we have all about military psychology and health, or the MEDO. G2 is going to be all that concerns about intelligence and counterintelligence. Our G3 is operations, instructions, and organization. And we also have a fire support officer that's coordinating different fires with nations around, or the nations that border us. Our G4 is going to be everything about logistics and administration. Our G5 is going to be civil affairs. And our G10 is going to be everything about communications. Next slide. Our Army, it's organized in 8 territorial divisions. And the 9th division is going to be the Air Assault Division. It's just in charge of the Army aviation. So in our Army, we also have aviation, not only our Air Force. And the 3 divisions we see in the bottom right corner of this slide, called FUDRA, FUCAD, and TE. These are special units. So one is like troops of the Army, and the other is Fuerza de Despliegue Rápido. And FUCAD is Fuerza Conjunta de Acción Decisiva. This is basically special units that were created to fight against all these insurgency. Next slide. This is our military conventional uniform, As you can see in the slide, this is how a soldier is going to look like in our country. Um, we have two uniforms, the one you see in the slide and in the bottom corner. We also have a desert type of camouflage. We have our different insignias you could see there, or all our patches that are worn in the uniform. We have our helmet, and our main weapon that's given to every soldier is the assault rifle, Galil. We could see it right there in the left. In the bottom picture, we have, again, a map of Colombia. This is how the divisions are distributed around the country. So as I said, we had 8 territorial divisions, and those are the departments where those divisions are located. I don't know if you could see like the small letters, the brigades that belong to each of those divisions. Next slide. Our weapon systems. These are the conventional weapon systems that our Army uses. Said before, so we have our main assault rifle, Galil. This is a 5.56 millimeter weapon. Second picture, we have a multiple grenade launcher. This is 40 millimeter grenades. We have our direct fire systems like our machine guns. So we have the M60 standard, you know it, and we have different types like this T70 and T90. We also have our indirect fire weapon systems, different mortars. These basically are 60 millimeter mortars. We also have 81 millimeter mortars. We have 120 millimeter mortars. And for our artillery, we have 105 millimeters. We also have 155 millimeter mortars. So I think you are all, you all know these weapon systems. I think you also have them. Next slide. The vehicles that we use in our Army. The first vehicle we see are the Strikers. You also know them. Our second vehicle is the M113. On the bottom we also have Hummers. And to the right, these are typically used by cavalry. So we have on the bottom right corner, we have one called Pegasus. It's practically a new vehicle, just like the Strikers. We have them just like 2 years ago. And on the top, we have Cascabel. These are similar, or they could be similar to your Abrams. Basically, their capabilities for the light infantry vehicles, well, they transport a squad. And I guess you're all familiar with the capabilities of the Strikers. They could be modified with their cannons, or for engineers, or for artillery, or for intelligence, for command and control. So these vehicles, you could adapt them to whatever branch you want. Next slide. These are the assets we have available for our Army. So the first picture we could see in the left top corner, that's going to be an Mi-17. It's used for transporting personnel. In the bottom, we have the Black Hawk UH-60. You're all familiar with it. The top right-hand corner, this is a UH-60 that we have modified as a TAC helicopter. It's basically the same Black Hawk, but it has different weapon systems and rockets that it could launch, so it could be similar maybe to your Apaches. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we have the Hueys, very famous after Vietnam, UH-1N, capabilities, transport personnel, and close air support. Next slide. We're going to talk now about our threat. The threat that we have right now in our country is basically insurgency. And as we could see in the map, the red color is going to be where the percentage of presence of these insurgent groups is very high. So we could see the south of the country is basically the highest level of presence of these groups, to the east and to the west. Um, the yellow color is going to be where there's a medium level of presence. The green color is going to be where the presence is low. And we have few white spots where basically there's no presence, but these white spots, we have part of the Amazonian region. So basically this is a very thick jungle where it's basically not possible to live. So we share these Amazons with Brazil, with Peru, and some parts of Ecuador. Next slide. These are the groups, the insurgent groups that are present in Colombia. So we have the ELN, the first one, Ejército de Liberación Nacional. That's basically like a National Liberation Army. In the middle picture, so we have the FARC. This is the most famous insurgent group. That's the group I'm telling you that they're doing now the peace process. That means Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia. In English, that would be something like Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. To the right, we have another group called Rastrojos. It doesn't have any translation. It's just like the name of the group, but it's like a mixture of different insurgencies. To the bottom left, we have EPL, Ejército Popular de Liberación. In the middle bottom picture, we have narco traffic. And to the right, we have BACRIM, Bandas Criminales. This is like criminal bands that make different crimes around the country. So not all the threat is just guerrillas, but there's also different threats like narco traffic and bandas criminales. A little bit of background, let's focus in FARC. So going in a little bit of background, how they were born, where they were born, who were their leaders. This structure was born around the year 1964. There was this place called Marquetalia, that's in the jungle, one of the jungles of Colombia. And what was the objective of this group? Basically, they wanted to finish with the social and political and economical inequality in the country. So before these groups were created, there was different wars between political parties. Like you guys here, you have Democrats and Republicans. So over there we have liberales and conservadores, the same thing, reds and blues. So it's almost the same problem. And what they wanted was, they were typically farmers, and they wanted to fight for their rights, they wanted to fight for equality and all these things. The most important leaders that they had at that time when they were born, it's a guy called Pedro Antonio Marin, also known as Tiro Fijo, or Manuel Marulanda. He had like two alias. And there's another guy called Luis Morantes, also known as Jacobo Arenas. So these guys were their leaders, political leaders and military leaders. So they were fighting both wars. So they were fighting the political war, and they were also fighting the real war, the war in arms. They found that we don't have an exact amount of people that founded these groups, but we know that they were really small at the time, probably no more than 50. And past the years, they became even more than 20,000 men in arms, according to all the strategies they were using. And their main actions against the government at that time, they usually did like political kidnapping. So they were kidnapping cousins, sons, and daughters of the politicians to make pressure, like political pressure. And they were also attacking the infrastructure of the state. So they were attacking the electrical power lines. They were attacking the pipelines that transport all the fuel and all these infrastructure of the country. That way they were making pressure to the government because their main objective is to get power of the country by force, going to war. That was their main objective. Next slide. Here we have some pictures of the leaders I was talking about. I'm not gonna name them all. We don't have enough time. But basically, this is how these guys look now. Well, before we're talking probably 40-something years ago. That's how they look now. Most of these guys are the ones that are right now in the peace process. I'm not gonna talk about that so much, so next slide, please. Techniques and crimes that these insurgent groups commit. As we could see in the slide, these pictures of boys and girls taken to war. Some of them because they were born and they just grew up in war and they adopt to do that. Some others because they get kidnapped. They get taken by force to their camps in the jungle and they get forced to fight a war that they don't even know what they're fighting. As you can see, these are boys and girls, probably 3, 4 years old, until 15 or 16. So in our country, you're underage. If you're under 18, you're underage. So we could see these type of crimes. Like this goes against human rights. This goes against childhood rights and everything. So that's one of the big problems, the recruitment of boys and girls to the war. Next slide. Some of the unconventional weapon systems that the enemy has, they get their support is basically where they get money from is from narco traffic, all the drugs. Before, we used to have a big problem that was the drug cartels in Colombia. Probably most of you know about Pablo Escobar, or you have listened that name, you have heard that name before. It's probably one of the most wanted guys by the FBI. Okay, a big terrorist, so he has been like the biggest narco traffic guy in the world. So all that money, the illegal business that gives more money in the world is trafficking drugs. So all that money is going to support the war of all these insurgent groups. Why? Because these insurgent groups give security. So the guys that make the drugs, they could have that security. So they're fighting against the different forces so they could do their drugs. They're securing their routes on ground and on the seas because as you could see, I showed you before, we have 2 seas. So it's a lot of water. And we also have a lot of land. So we have to be securing that. So all that money goes to support the war. You can see they have unconventional weapons, capabilities. They have 5.56 millimeters, 7.62, different explosive. We're gonna see later on all the IED capabilities that they have. They have machine guns. I'm not gonna name the countries, but they also get support from different countries, not only in South America, but countries in Europe and Asia. There's some support. Just like to have a big understanding that the problem is not just in one country, because the support comes from other parts, not other in the political support, but also financing the war and fighting the war. Even people go out the country, receive training in different countries, come back, and continue fighting the war. Next slide. Some other, as I told you before, they're IEDs. So they're very, very experienced in IEDs. I think Colombia was one of the countries that had more mines, anti-tank mines or anti-personnel mines that were buried throughout the country. Right now they're doing like a human, like taking away all the mines. So some battalions have received some special training so they could go out to the field, jungle, desert, wherever, all the area of operations, and take out these mines and destroy them. Later on, we're gonna see what are the effects of all these IEDs. We could see they get support with ground-to-air systems. They also have the rockets, so they have the capabilities to destroy aircrafts, to destroy tanks, because they also have anti-tank capabilities. The picture we see in the right top corner, we call them cilindros. They're the same cylinders that like gas, you use for propane gas. So they put them in those big tanks and they launch them. So that's like firing a 155 millimeter cannon. And when that comes down, it blows up and it's very powerful. In the bottom, we could see different type of grenades they have. They could use this like indirect fire. But as we could see, this is all is improvised. It's not like if you're gonna get your mortar from the fabric like the military forces have them. They just make it with pipes and tubes and whatever they can. The bottom right corner, we also see a picture of some soldiers that found all those explosives in the jungle, and those are the ramps that are used to launch them. So they have people that are very experienced, and they have done different courses in explosives to prepare all these IEDs and use them not only against the military forces, but use it against the civilians and to use them against the infrastructure of the country. Next slide. Some other examples. This is just a typical anti-personnel mine. It's detonated by pressure. It's very simple. You just step on it and it blows up. There's different mechanisms. You have pressure, tension, by radio, by cell phone, by light, by movement. Well, whatever you can imagine right now, you could detonate any type of mine. So we see other pictures of some different IEDs that soldiers are finding every day in different operation areas. Next slide. Here we could see the effects of these IEDs. So as I said before, it doesn't only affect the military forces, which are the ones who are fighting the fight, but it affects kids, civilians, farmers, anyone. So they just say every mine has a name. You just don't know what name it is. Next slide. What are some of the Colombian Army tactics that are being used to fight against this threat? That's what we're going to talk about next. But before, come back. Before we continue, I would just like to ask if anyone could tell me if you've had any experience with these IEDs, someone that has been deployed, maybe Iraq or Afghanistan or any place in the world you guys go. If you see these type of IEDs, they're fabricated like you could do a bomb of these in your house. Not usually, we could see landmines and we know claymores, and you just go, they're very secure mines, but these artifacts, they're improvised. They're, like I said, they're made in your home. If any of you have had this experience, how to detect these artifacts, how to destroy them, or how to fight this. But I think there's no more lethal weapon than an IED. Someone? Okay, I'll tell you later on how we fight against these IEDs. Next slide. How to distinguish between a friend and a foe, or the enemy. So as we could see these two pictures, they basically tell us what a farmer looks like and what a farmer doesn't look like. So as we see the picture in the left, you could encounter a farmer in your patrols every day, in the jungle, in the desert, in the mountain, wherever. When you encounter any person, any civilian during your patrols, you have to talk to him, analyze him, and see if he's a threat to you. So the first gentleman we see here in the left, he's an old guy. You could see he's tired. Maybe you could see his hands, they're full of blisters. He looks like a farmer, right? He looks like if he was working all day, feeding his family. But now we take a look at the picture in the right. Does that look like a farmer? Has he been working all day? Is he tired? No. But he's still a non-combatant, right? He's just wearing civilian clothes. But in reality, He could just be one of these criminals, terrorists. That's how they're fighting their war right now. They just get their weapons, they put them in a house. Since we can't go in, it's easy for them. They're just outside, observing the troops, looking what they're doing, informing the insurgents where the troops are, and planning different attacks. So we have to suspect about one guy of these. So we have to be very cautious and take all the SOPs we have, do all the procedures, apply all the techniques we have in the doctrine. Next slide. Talking about our tactics, very similar to the U.S. tactics. You can find in your manuals or your field manuals. Just talking a little bit about crossing danger areas, how to react to sniper threat or a sniper attack. We're going to talk a little bit about the combat drills. I would like to know how you guys do the crossing of a danger area. Who could tell me? No one? Jason?
So a couple different ways of crossing an LDA, linear danger area. They teach that a lot in Ranger School and in your basic training. But you establish security on both sides of the road, near and far, and then you have the smallest lead element push across the LDA, establish a security perimeter on the far edge, and then once that's radio up, saying, hey, clear, good to go, they cleared that area. I think it's about 150, 200 meters out from the LDA. Then the main body can typically cross over. And that's just common practice. It's like the simplest form of LDA crossing I can really go into.
Okay, thanks. Basically, pretty similar to what you do, applying this tactics of crossing danger areas. We should just consider that if it's daylight or if it's at night, so we have two different types of doing it, but it's basically the same. We're going to establish our support by fire positions. We know our movements, especially in the day, have to be very concealed and covered. And according to the size of this danger area, we're going to use, we could see the diagram in the bottom. What's our direction of advance? So we're going to use the obstacles, the natural obstacles we have, all the vegetation, to go around that obstacle. We're not just going to cross through the danger area, because the most probable thing, that's where a sniper's going to be, and he's going to attack our troops. So basically, establish your support by fire, go around the danger area, establish a link-up point at the other side, and that's where everyone's going to go. Our next is going to be the reaction to a sniper threat. So the first thing, we're going to talk about action, reaction, and counteraction. So when you get attacked by a sniper, these are basically the steps that you have to follow to get out of that danger area. So you're going to establish cover and concealment, where you could protect yourself from fire. You're going to try to identify the location of this enemy or of this sniper in this case. When a sniper fires, or you have a dead guy or you have a wounded guy, that's for sure. So you're going to use your smoke grenades to conceal the wounded person or the wounded soldier, and you're going to try to take them out to a secure area. And you're going to establish your support by fire to try to engage the sniper. You could use your direct weapon systems or indirect weapon systems, whatever you have available. And after this has finished, you just have to secure the area, change your axis of advance, and continue your mission or the movement towards where you were going. Next slide. How to choose a patrol base, pretty similar. These are some of the plans we use when we establish a patrol base. So these are different plans that we have to establish. First of all, our security plan. So you have to spread your people depending on the terrain. Obviously, you always have to analyze the met factors and analyze your terrain to establish your patrol base. So basically, you're just going to do your security. You have to establish a 360 security. You have to establish your communications. You could never lose your comms because that's the most dangerous thing you could do in a patrol. If you lose your communications, you're already losing the fight without starting to fight. Okay. You're going to do, if you have, according to the situation, you could do your maintenance plan. So you could clean your weapons and all these things, the cleaning plan. The field feeding plan. So our soldiers have to eat. We're not machines. We have to do our fires plan. It's also very important. So you have to establish where it's going to be your mortars located and select your fields of fire for all your direct weapon systems and indirect weapon systems. And finally, you could have your recovery plan or rest plan because your soldiers have to rest. So very important. 3 important steps, or the most important ones: communications, as I talked before. In the picture in the middle, we see the engineers. Very important. We have a lot of mines. So our engineers in each platoon, almost all platoon, it's a group called XDEM. So that's explosives and demolitions. So these are the engineers that are in charge of searching the area where you're going to go, and they're going to clear the area and make sure that there's no mines. We could see right there, so that's the exit group. They're doing their search. That's just a little path. So they're searching that it's clear of mines. They have different systems. They have their bottoms and like metal detectors. They also use the string to identify any tension devices or explosive devices. We also have our canines, the dogs. So this team is very important. After they do the search, good to go, the area is clear, then you could put your patrol and come in that area because it's already a secure area. And finally, we'll cover and concealment. You don't want to be seen or you don't want to get shot by the enemy. So very important. Next slide. These are some unconventional combat maneuvers that we basically use or generally use in irregular combat. I think you're familiar with these maneuvers. We have 8 basic maneuvers, which are movement to contact, infiltration, surprise actions, military stratagem, counter ambush, present block, ambush, and attack. Is anyone not familiar with any of these? Or has anyone never done one of these maneuvers? In the back. Well, I'll explain when we get there. Okay. Next slide. Well, we're going to go through these one by one. So the first one, very known to you, is movement to contact.
Real quick, if you can, man, can you just, I guess, in the interest of time is always our biggest constraint, right? So we've taught here. It's 37 right now. We have like less than 25 minutes to get through it. I appreciate all the level of work you put in, but I want to really highlight the class, some of the unique things you can talk about. Can you press forward to, I think, number 6, the press and block, and then I think it's the military strategy?
Yes, sir.
Who's the other one?
Strategy.
There you go, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this one. Yeah, the other ones you're familiar because you do them every day. Basically, military stratagem. As we could read the slide, its purpose is to use our maximum intellectual capacity to influence the enemy's decisions and making him to commit mistakes and decreasing their capabilities on the battlefield. So basically what we want to do, we want to trick the enemy. Like talking in these words, we want to trick them to make them do mistakes, commit mistakes. We have 3 types. So we have intimidation, we have deformation, and fragmentation. Intimidation is basically make them fear with all our combat power, air superiority, so they're going to be intimidated. Okay, this is like self-explanatory. Defamation is basically all the propaganda, publicity that we could do against these groups and make the people know that they're not good, they're doing the bad. So that's defamation. And fragmentation is try to spread them apart. You know, they also have their organization, so they're organized. So what we try to do, we have different informants or people that give information to the military forces. So they're gonna get nervous because they don't have people to trust. Even sometimes their own family members have given information, their wives or whatever. So basically, fragmentation, you want to try to spread them apart. 3 techniques. We have military deception, we have decoy, and simulation of movements. Any questions, sir, about this? No? Let's go to the present block. Okay, there's another type of maneuver. It allows to block the adversary's movement in a general area and conduct pressure patrols. We have 2 types, when the enemy is in movement or when the enemy is stationary. The most important thing about this technique is that you have to analyze very good your terrain. So present block is just pressure and block. So basically, with your combat power, you're gonna make pressure against this enemy to try to block all his movements. And I'm talking about terrain, because according to the terrain, there's different techniques. We're not gonna talk about them because there's like 15 techniques for this. But according to terrain, that's basically the maneuver you wanna apply. I'll just give an example. It's called like hammer or something like that. I don't know the traduction or translation for that, like the hammer. So it's basically if you have a body of water or a river, so you're gonna use that river to your advantage, right? So you wanna do, it's probably similar to a penetration or to a frontal attack, but the difference is that you're gonna attack the enemy by his weakest spot, or the weakest spot you could identify, and you're gonna attack with the maximum combat power that you have. What's gonna happen with this? So you're doing the pressure right there, right, with your combat power. And the block is gonna be by the natural obstacle we have, that's the river. Or they die fighting, or they die drowned. They drown in the water. So that's basically how we apply that technique. You could apply it with mountains or different natural obstacles. Okay? But basically, that's the most important part. You have to analyze terrain, so you could apply one of these techniques. Next slide. Okay, ambush. No, next. Attack, we know them. Okay, so everyone, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, please.
So we talked a little bit about the enemy threats that are currently in Colombia, the FARC being primary. Now, primary means of communication, are they using cell phones, FM radios? What's the primary means of communication? And then how are you guys combating that? Are you guys doing any electronic warfare? Are you guys using jammers? If they're using cell phones, are you trying to decrypt those cell phones? What are the techniques you guys are using?
Okay, well, yeah, they use conventional communication systems. Cell phones, where they have signal, they could use. They also have FM radios, VHF radios, UHF radios. We do have jammers, so we have the capability to intercept their calls, intercept their communications. There's a technique used like triangulation, and if they're emitting or they're talking by a radio someplace, so these antennas pick up that signal and they triangulate and they give you like a vicinity location where that transmission is being done, and well, you could attack that objective. That could be like an objective of opportunity or something. But we do have the way of intercepting their radio systems or their phones. Yeah.
So with respect to your military and then the insurgent threats that you guys have, do you guys have a big issue with corruption in your military, with them either siding with some of the insurgents or any of the insurgencies infiltrating your ranks, like infighting?
Yeah, of course, like in any institution in the world, every institution in the world has corruption. We have to fight against this corruption, and the corrupt people go to jail. But we do fight against corruption in any institution. In our country, the army is the most, or no, not the less corrupt institution, and the institution that the people believe more in. But of course, there's corruption everywhere. But we fight against that. Anyone else?
Yeah, hey, Lieutenant Diaz, can you go to the insurgent faction slide? The insurgent faction slide? So just with the insurgent factions, what's the dynamic between them? Like, do they fight each other, or do they work together against you guys? And then how does that affect your guys' TTPs?
This slide?
Yeah, I just wanted to just get a view.
Okay, some parts, they act like independent groups, and they have their own territory. So in their organization, they respect their borders, okay? That's why, let's go to the first slide, the map, the threat. For example, the largest threat, they have their borders. So they have their limits, and they operate within those limits. Sometimes they act together, sometimes they don't. That depends on their leaders. So they're the ones that take take that decision. When they want to do a massive terrorist attack, usually they're going to work together because they're going to benefit from it, okay? But in some parts, they don't work together. They even fight against each other. Sometimes they fight thinking that they're fighting against the army. Sometimes they don't even know who they're fighting against. But they're different groups, okay?
Okay, so just pretty much each faction is staying in their territory.
Yes.
And then how does that work with the Colombian Armed Forces and then the National Police? Like, who does what? And
The National Police is supposed to be in charge of the security of the nation. But the military forces, they're supposed to be in charge of the security of the borders. So the Army is supposed to control the borders, Air Force is supposed to control the airspace, the Navy is supposed to control the water. Since this threat grew so much, because this is an internal war. It's an internal threat. There's no nations involved. They're all Colombians, so that threat, they're Colombians. It's supposed to be the police in charge of this. But through the years, the threat grew so much that the military forces had to go in and basically do the police job. Okay? Any more questions?
So we talked about how FARC and the other groups get their money, but how do they move their resources into the country? And how successful have you been at interdicting their supply lines?
Okay. They have all their logistics, and they also get help from, like I showed you that picture of the farmer, and these guys in civilian clothes and everything. They have all their supply routes. They have all these, not infrastructure, they have their logistical plans, and they get support from the people, from civilians. But these civilians, they're also working for them, just not in arms, dressed in civilian clothes. And they have different routes where they could go. You know, it's a big country. They could get their supplies by rivers. They could get their supplies by different roads or different tracks. And basically the civilians are the guys that take it to them. But these civilians, they're just dressed as civilians, but we call them milicianos. I don't know the translation for that word. But milicianos are civilians that support the insurgency. Yeah. That answered your question?
So have you had any success interdicting their supply routes into your country?
Yeah, of course. Basically, that's the biggest success or the the most successful military operations have been by interdicting these lines of supplies. There's these devices called like beacons or beacons? Yeah, like beacons. They emit some signals, and when we penetrate these supply routes and like the people they trust, they've put these devices where those leaders are, and there has been very successful operations when they go and bomb these big camps they have. They have camps for 1,500 people or something, very big camps in the jungle. And all this is successful because we penetrate those routes or logistical routes with these types of devices, so we can know the location of the group and plan the military operation to go do certain attack.
So I understand that the canopy, covers and conceals the enemy throughout the jungle, and it has to be very tough to find them. But how much aerial assets are you guys actually putting out there with the Air Force and the Army to kind of control these routes to get in and out of the jungle, which kind of ties to his question, as well as spotting these camps where they're training children all the way up?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult, like you said. The jungle is very thick. Visibility is going to be limited. The biggest job is for the ground troops that really have to go and find and search. The air assets basically do their job. When the ground troops get a location of a camp, we have reconnaissance groups. They've been infiltrated for 1-2 months, just observing one target. When we have that confirmed, the air assets can come and do their bombings or whatever. And the ground troops basically have the main effort in these types of operations. But the air assets support all the logistical part because they have to get supplies to these parts. In the jungle, there's no roads. So you could only get your supplies by air and sometimes by water, because not every time by water you could get your supplies. But the air assets are gonna be the ones that supply. They could infiltrate. We have special forces. They do special air assault operations. So that's where the air assets are going to be very important to do these types of operations. Okay.
Are y'all doing any civil operations to convince people to not participate in the narco trafficking business? Because the real root of the problem, obviously, is that North America has this sensational appetite for drugs, and then there's a market in your country to provide that to us. So what are you doing to convince your people that, for economic means, that they should go into legitimate business opportunities versus doing the narco traffic industry? Like, what kind of civil operations are you conducting?
Yeah, we have that psychological operations. We call them psychological operations. It's basically that to influence civilians not to go in those illegal, the illegal drugs. They also do operations to influence the insurgents that are in those groups, make them get out. And that's throughout all the nation. As I showed you in the like third or fourth slide with the organization of all the forces, or the army, sorry. There's G5, that's psychological action. So it's a big division that's in charge of doing all these type of psychological or civil affairs operations. But yeah, we do have that group that is in charge of conducting all these types of operations. Basically for those two reasons. First, civilians not going into the drug business or not going into these illegal terrorist groups. And the other one is for them to come out, the ones that are inside already. Because as I told you, like in the beginning, most people that are in these illegal groups, some are taken by force, so they just get threatened and they have to go. And some, they just get tricked. They promise them a lot of things, that they're gonna give them money, that they're gonna take care of their families and all these things. So they don't have anything else to do in their life, and they just go. But it's obviously not true. They're not gonna get paid. They're not gonna take care of their families. But yeah, we have these type of civilian affairs and psychological operations. Anyone else?
So just kind of taking a quick swag at what the map looks like. It look like based off of the slide that we were just looking at, it looks like a couple of divisions are covering a lot more area than the ones that, like the ones in the southeast are covering a lot more geographical area than the ones in the northwest. Is there any change to or any difference in the MTO or the task org for like 8th Division and 6th Division and 4th Division for the amount of area, and especially it looked like there was a lot of red in that area where the highest threat was?
Yeah, of course. You can see in the right, well, the letters are small, but you see the brigades that each division has. So for example, 1st Division only has 2 brigades, the 2nd Brigade and the 10th Brigade. That's in the north of the country, like where it says over there, 1st Division. It's a small piece of terrain compared to the rest. But if you see the other divisions, they have more brigades. So if we have more brigades, we have more battalions. We have more battalions, so that's the amount of troops. So that's where the division is. So for example, if you see the 8th Division, it has 8th, 7th, and 6th Division. They basically have like the main effort because those are the divisions that are located to the south, east, and west. So they have more brigades and more battalions. In these divisions, we also have battalions called Batallones de Combate Terrestre. So these are special battalions that were founded or created just to go fight. They don't have any station. Like they go in to the area of operations, 6, 7, 8 months, come out, home. 1 month vacation, come in again. Like they don't have any battalion like station, you know, like any. So these divisions have those types of battalion, like professional soldiers, and they're the ones in those areas. Any more questions?
So this is with regard to what we've been doing lately in class. We've been doing a lot of MDMP, co-analysis, code development. Do you guys do a bunch of that at your staff levels? Have you taken place in any MDMP at your guys' I guess your level, your echelon? You know, how does that work for you guys, especially with an unknown threat always present?
Yeah, we have the levels of planning pretty similar to yours. So at the tactical level, we have the same TLPs you have. And at the operational level, that's battalion staff and higher, we conduct MDMP, but it just has another name. But yeah, we do MDMP and TLPs. Everyone to its level.
Great job today. Let's give him a round of applause. So what we realize, and first, thank you all for stepping up and doing this, because it's a regional security discussion. It doesn't make sense to have a bunch of Americans brief this, because you get to see their perspective on a problem. What did you notice that's really different about the problem compared to what we deal with? Right. It's in their country. Okay, and so talk to the international officers, to include the Marines. Just kidding. It's got to lighten it up a little. But find out what's the purpose of their military, how they're organized, and then, you know, it was a good question back there of, hey, where's the main effort? Are you weighing them all the same? And what do you put energy against? There's a lot that's the same, but you've got some complex terrain, mountains, rivers, and so you see this press and block technique. And then you guys think, okay, well, I've been in some complex terrain in Iraq and Afghanistan. What can I pull away from it? What's different and useful, and why are they doing things? So again, thank you for your time. Thanks for preparing this, and good job. Great.